Today, I'm going to be teaching you about a functional analysis and how to implement one into a natural environment. So first, what is functional analysis? Functional analysis can be defined as a type of behavioral assessment. It is typically used to determine the causes and consequences of behavior. It is broken down into 5 different conditions: play, control, attention, alone, escape, and tangible. The first condition we're going to discuss is play or control. For this condition, this is when the therapist will allow access to preferred items that are going to be continuously available throughout the session. No demands or prompts are placed during this time. Instead, the therapist is mostly just observing the client unless the client initiates the conversation or play. Consequences are also not in effect for target behavior, so target behaviors may not be exhibited during this time. For example, the therapist may state, "We are going to play with some toys for a while." I would then sit and watch the client engage with their toys, but not place any demands or prompts to play with them if they are not engaging or present any other demands. So, if the client initiates play or conversation during this time, the therapist can interact with them. However, if the client does not initiate, then the therapist would not give direct attention, but would instead provide 5 to 10 seconds of attention every 30 seconds to 1 minute by just saying things such as, "I love how you're playing so nicely," or "Great job." Next, we're going to talk about attention. During this condition, the therapist may want to find out if their target behavior is being caused by attention. During this time, the therapist may state that they need to do something that will not be available. They will withhold attention for the short period of time, and if the client were to engage in problem behavior, they may offer attention in a neutral tone. For example, if a child is engaging in property destruction with one of their toys, such as banging or throwing, we may say something like, "Oh, that's not how we play with our toys," and place the toy back where it was. This is also a good time to see if neutral tone comments or redirection help, or if planned ignoring is the best option. For example, let's say the therapist states, "I need to do some work and will not be available for the next 10 minutes. They may then go over and sit in a chair and read a book or jot some notes. Let's say the client is engaging with their toys and begins kicking and screaming. The therapist may then look up and say, "Don't do that, you may hurt yourself. Let's use our indoor voice while playing inside with our toys." This can help us to tell if the behavior was solely to get our attention or if there's another function. Next, we're going to talk about the alone condition. In this condition, the client will not have access to any reinforcers and will be alone in a room with no toys or you. This will be a room that can be easily monitored from the outside or can be easily accessed if there were any dangerous behaviors that were to occur, such as SIB or self-injurious behavior. The goal of this condition is to determine if the behavior is caused when they are alone with nothing around. This picture is to show an example of a room that would be great for observing this condition. A room with one-way glass so that a therapist could observe without the client seeing them. Instead of the picture, however, the client would have no toys or access to anything or anyone so that the therapist could observe them alone. For example, the therapist may state, "I will be back in 10 minutes. You need to stay in here." They will then leave the room and observe the client with no reinforcers or toys. There will be no consequences in effect if problem behavior were to occur. Instead, if the behavior becomes dangerous, the therapist can still practice planned ignoring while implementing the appropriate protocol for said behavior. Next, we're going to talk about the escape condition. This condition is for the therapist to see if target behaviors occur in order to escape demands. This will typically occur during table activities like discrete trial training. The therapist will implement trials with prompting procedures such as verbal, gestural, or physical prompts. If a target behavior is exhibited during the demand, the therapist will remove the demand materials, all of the materials used for the trials, and all prompting stops. This will be for a short period of time or when the target behavior stops, and the therapist will then present a new demand. If a demand is presented without target behavior, the client will receive verbal praise. For example, a therapist may lay out non-identical matching items for the client to match. The therapist may then reassort the cards each trial. When the SD match is given, the client exhibits any target behavior, let's say they exhibit flopping, then the therapist will remove the matching cards from the table and will not prompt the client at this time. If the client stops the target behavior, the therapist can then lay out the matching cards again and prompt them to match. If the client matches and does not engage in the flopping behavior this time, then the client would receive verbal praise. Our last condition is tangible. This condition is for the therapist to determine if the target behaviors are occurring to gain access to items. This is usually tested using highly preferred reinforcers that were determined in a preference assessment. During this time, the therapist would allow access to one of these reinforcers for a short time, then would state something such as, "I need this item, please give it to me." If the client does not hand over the item and engages in any target behavior, the therapist will take the item without prompting. The item would then be returned to the client as they calm and the trials would restart. An example of this would be a client playing with their preferred items, such as a toy car. The therapist will allow access to the car and the other highly preferred reinforcers nearby for a short time before prompting, "I need the car, please give it to me," or "Let me play with the car." If the client does not hand over the car and instead engages in target behavior such as screaming, then the therapist will then take the car and return it to the client after a short time after they calm and the trials will restart. That is all I have for this functional analysis presentation, and I hope that this helped you learn more about functional analysis and how to implement it in the natural environment.